You probably think you know the story of Solomon the Wise, but I guarantee you don't know this story. This is the tale of a prophet king who had to fight a war unlike any other. A war against an enemy you can't see, you can't touch, and you definitely can't fight with a sword.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? How do you fight something like that? Imagine your kingdom isn't facing an army at the gates. Instead, it's being destroyed by whispers. Whispers that poison minds and turn friends into enemies. How in the world do you fight back against an invisible invasion?
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story starts with Solomon, the son of the legendary King David. But here's the thing you have to understand. Solomon wasn't just another prince waiting to be king. He was chosen by God as a prophet. He knew his mission was way bigger than just running a country. He was getting ready for a divine war.
And if you want to know just how big his mission was, just listen to his prayer. This wasn't some guy asking for more gold or a bigger palace. No way. This was Solomon asking for a kind of authority that no one had ever had before, because he knew he was about to face a threat that no one had ever faced before.
And what was that threat? Well, it's the stuff of nightmares. Solomon could see something that no one else could. He saw that the barrier, the veil, between our world and the demonic realm of the jinn and the shayateen was getting thin, like paper thin. And these beings weren't just going to be whispering temptations anymore. They were about to cross over.
But here's the kicker. It's like he was fighting a war on two fronts. Because it wasn't just the supernatural threat he had to worry about. He was also getting serious pushback right at home. As he tried to prepare everyone for the spiritual battle, his own council of elders thought he was completely delusional. And the divide between them was just massive. On one side, you have Solomon trying to rally the kingdom for what he saw as a holy war to save their souls. And on the other, you have the elders basically accusing him of making up fairy tales to hide the fact that he was, in their eyes, a young and inexperienced ruler.
You can almost hear the frustration in their voices, can't you? To them, Solomon was just this radical kid, ignoring centuries of wisdom and tradition. They were convinced he was dragging them into some made-up conflict, while the real problems of the kingdom were just being ignored. But here's the thing. Solomon was right. And when that barrier finally broke, the invasion began. But it wasn't an army with swords and shields. It was a creeping corruption of the human spirit. The invisible enemy had started its attack.
At first, it was subtle. The whispers that were once far away suddenly felt like they were right in your ear. The temptations you could normally brush off became almost impossible to resist. You could feel the very fabric of society starting to unravel.
And then, that influence turned into action. The shayateen were no longer just some abstract concept. They were a real presence, moving among the people, pouring gasoline on the fires of greed, jealousy, and anger.
And that was the most terrifying realization. The enemy wasn't at the gates. The enemy was already inside. They were in the marketplaces. They were in people's homes. And worst of all, they were in people's hearts.
The result was absolute chaos. What the demonic influence did was take the worst parts of human nature and turn the volume up to 11. People who'd been peaceful neighbors for years were now at each other's throats over a few coins. Trust was gone. And in this wave of horrific violence, Solomon suffered the ultimate tragedy. He lost his wife and his unborn child.
This was rock bottom. Everything he had prayed for, everything he had built, it was gone. His kingdom, he said, looked like a lifeless corpse. Not destroyed by an army, but rotted from the inside out. This was his darkest hour.
But you know how it goes. It's always in the darkest moment that the story turns. Having lost almost everything, Solomon turns to the only power he has left, his faith. He cries out to God, not for victory anymore, but just for deliverance. And the answer he receives is, well, it's beyond anything you could imagine. First, he's given command over the wind itself, meaning he can move his armies across the land in an instant. But get this, he's also given a ring of power that gives him authority over the very same demons that were destroying his kingdom. He could finally fight the invisible enemy on its own turf.
So, armed with these incredible divine gifts, Solomon stops playing defense. Oh no. He launches a counter-offensive. The entire war was about to turn on a dime.
Can you just picture what that must have looked like? An entire army, not marching for weeks, but flying on the wind, descending on cities that had been torn apart by hate. This wasn't just a military advantage. It was a miracle. It was a sign to the people that God had not abandoned them.
And with the power of that ring, Solomon could finally command the unseen.
The demonic forces were captured, the human rebels were defeated, and finally, order was restored. He had won the unwinnable war.
But the story doesn't just end with a victory, it ends with a prophecy. Solomon warns everyone that this battle, it wasn't the last one. He says that in the end times, these same forces will be unleashed again. But he also leaves this incredible message of hope, that a final savior will come, and in the end, goodness will triumph.
And that brings us right back to where we started. Solomon's story seems to suggest that when you're faced with an enemy you can't see, an enemy that attacks your very soul and your society from the inside, the ultimate weapon isn't a sword or a shield. It's something else entirely.